Welcome to the Clever Line YouTube channel. Today we will talk about Muammar Gaddafi. Libya's ousted leader Muammar Gaddafi has written his name in Libya's almost 50-year political history. His period is very important in terms of understanding and analyzing the geography of the Middle East. This period, which started with the Arab Spring and turned into a civil war, was not the date of new beginnings for Libya. On the contrary, the chaos that started in the country still continues. After the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, successive governments in Libya failed to ensure security in the country. Political instability and armed militias fighting against Gaddafi in the Libyan revolution are seen as the country's biggest problem. It has been 10 years since Gaddafi was overthrown in Libya. But who is Gaddafi, this extraordinary leader of the Middle East? What does it mean for Libya? Gaddafi graduated from Libya University, Faculty of Law, Department of History in 1963. He later entered the military academy in Benghazi. After graduating, he went to England and received specialization training in the military field. During his university years, Gaddafi was influenced by Arab nationalism and joined anti-Zionist movements. In 1969, he founded a secret organization with a group of young officers. Gaddafi, who became a captain in 1969, staged a coup against the King Idris, who was in Turkey at that time. This coup brought Gaddafi to power and also meant that his 42-year rule had begun. The revolution seized control on behalf of the Command Council and dissolved the constitutional institutions. He announced that he would establish an Islamic socialism based on Islamic principles. He said he would work for the Arab League, and together with independent countries, he would oppose racism, colonialism and social oppression. Perhaps what distinguished Gaddafi from most leaders and made him stay in memory was the giant tent he took with him during his foreign visits. Muammar Gaddafi preferred to stay in a Bedouin tent instead of a hotel during his visits abroad. Even if he was a head of state, he lived like a Bedouin. Gaddafi's tent was evaluated as an interesting example of how different the East and West's perception of power was at that time. On the other hand, some segments described his political style and life as contrary and protest. Gaddafi took the example of Gamal Abdel Nasser, who, like himself, came to power in a military coup in Egypt and became the leader of the Arab world. He tried to implement the reforms carried out in Egypt in his own country. British and US military bases and troops were driven out of the country. He criticized the oil companies nationally. He confiscated the property of the Italian and Jewish minorities, forcing them to emigrate. After Gaddafi came to power, he undersigned major development projects in Libya. National income per capita in Libya was higher than other oil-producing countries in 2010. Libya was no longer a poor country and there were no serious economic problems. During the Gaddafi era, the literacy rate reached 86% and the quality of life improved. Again, under his rule, serious progress was made, especially in the construction sector. So much so that many Turkish businessmen and workers went from Turkey to Libya during this period. This situation continued until the civil war period. However, despite these successes, Gaddafi started to implement an oppressive regime by taking the control of oil revenues on himself and his close circle after a while. He tried to suppress all kinds of opposition with repression and purges. After 1986, with the embargo imposed by the USA on the aviation and oil sectors, Libya entered into economic trouble. On the other hand, the fact that the wealth of the country was not reflected in the popular base caused the reactions against Gaddafi to increase. Gaddafi's rule was spreading for almost half a century, and when the dates showed in February 2011, the protests that started with Benghazi began to spread in waves. Authorities carried out airstrikes to suppress the demonstrations that spread to other cities. Many diplomats representing Libya internationally resigned. In March 2011, world leaders, who came together at the London conference, called on Gaddafi to hand over the administration to the people. Gaddafi announced that he would not relinquish control of Tripoli and would remain in power. In response, the International Court of Justice decided to arrest Gaddafi for committing crimes against humanity. These events triggered by the Arab Spring turned into a civil war. Gaddafi's regime collapsed with the fall of Tripoli on the 23rd of August 2011. The rebels captured Tripoli. Gaddafi's family left Libya and took refuge with punishment. Muammar Gaddafi on the 20th of October 2011. He was captured and lynched by soldiers of the National Transitional Council in his hometown of Sirte. Gaddafi's dictatorship, which came to power in 1969 with a bloodless military revolution, ended with a bloody rebellion. The main reason for this intervention of the West was stated as the human rights violations of Gaddafi and his relatives. However, the main reason was that the West was afraid that Libya would become an uncontrollable power. Another remarkable issue was that the USA wanted Gaddafi to leave. Because the nationalization of high-quality sweet oil used in spaceships and planes with reserves in Libya outside the control of the USA and Europe was disturbing the USA. Among the reasons for the increase in anti-Gaddafi opposition in Europe are the establishment of organizations such as the African Money Fund and RAS.com, Gaddafi's initiative in these institutions on behalf of Libya, and his pioneering initiatives that will lead to serious income losses for Europe.